That's where the thermocline sets up. That will actually move shallower throughout the year, that thermocline will. Once that happens, you have some fish that just are like, hey, I'm going shallow. That's where some of the best oxygen is, regardless of the water temperature. If it's 82 or if it's 92, there's going to be fish in that really shallow water. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and this month's technique of the month video. We talked about the couple of baits in the Pick 2 More. We talked about that Terminator Poppin' Frog as well as the Bass Pro Bullhog, but applying both of these, kind of the technique of the month and what I wanted to name this was shallow thick stuff. Being that it is August, it's summertime is obviously here all across the country. It doesn't matter at this point in time of the year if you're in Texas or if you're in Minnesota. It is the summertime and it is the dog days kind of summer. So wanted to pick a couple or these two baits really apply well to this technique, in my opinion, for fishing that shallow thick stuff. A lot of times those fish, that maybe went out deep in May or June or whenever postponed, once you get a little bit later in the summer, I feel like you get lakes that will stratify, I believe is the correct term for that. Does that sound right, JD? Stratify. That's where the thermocline sets up. And, and then that will actually move shallower throughout the year, that thermocline will. But once that happens, you have some fish that just are like, hey, I'm going shallow. That's where some of the best oxygen is, regardless of the water temperature. If it's 82 or if it's 92, there's going to be fish in that really shallow water because that is a lot of times where the most oxygen is. So if you can find areas that have some heavy cover in shallow water, those are places that to me are going to be really good. Being able to have cover for those fish seems to be really important this time of the year. They can find those places that have some good shade, and they're able to pull into that and get to where the water is a little bit cooler. And then other things that you have going on, maybe you've got a river system coming in, or you've got a creek or a spring or anything else feeding in, and you've got a little bit of cooler water as well as more oxygenated water in those areas. But again, finding those places with really heavy cover is going to be where those fish set up. Both of these baits are stuff that you can fish in those areas, really well. So for me, I'm going to look for places. I mean, the ideal scenario, I'll lay it out like this. A river system where you've got some grass that has broke up, floated up, whatever, and then it's blown in against a piece of wood. You've got a stump, you've got a lay down, you've got whatever, and then you've got this small mat. I don't want something as big as the boat, but if I've got something that's as big as the back deck of the boat or the floor of the boat, just a little small mat blown up against a tree or something like that from the current, that's going to create a really good canopy underneath of that. And hopefully it's not going to be so thick that I need, an ounce and a half or 2 ounce weight to get through that. I can take a 3/4 ounce weight or a 1 ounce weight on that bull hog, punch down through that cover, and get to where those fish are at. If it's even more thin than that, or if it's just a really shady place, maybe there's a little bit of foam that's washed in, that's where I can take that Terminator Poppin' Frog and skip into those places and work through that. I feel like those places that don't have quite as thick a canopy over top, those fish are a little bit more likely to come up and bite that frog, as well as places that have clear water. I seem to catch a little bit less fish flipping when the water is really, really clear versus the top water. If I'm able to get that top water to where those fish are at and I feel like they're able to see it, clear water, I'm actually going to get more bites on that. And one more kicker that I'll add with that. So if I'm fishing a river, if it's clear water and it's a bright sunny day, top water is hands down the way to go if you're fishing in those little shady pockets like that. Everything about that screams backwards. We always talk about throwing top water on cloudy days and that type of stuff, but clear water in a river system with the sun shining is going to be a top water deal for me as long as there's some shade to be fishing it in. So, but that thick cover, man, that's just where bass go a lot of times in the summertime. If you're on a lake that's got a lot of vegetation that grows up, I think of a Guntersville or Chickamauga. Once the grass gets up good, getting in those places where that grass is thick and creating those good mats, man, that's a lot of times where you can have your best success in the summertime. So be sure that you seek those places out. For me on the frog, just to kind of go through the setups on some of these with that Terminator popping frog, one of two rods, kind of depending a little bit on what I'm doing with it. It's going to be a carbon light setup for both of them, carbon light reel. I like the fast reel. I like the 8-3-1, for this kind of technique. But if I'm fishing more just overhanging trees, not making real long casts, but I'm really wanting to make extremely accurate casts, that 7-foot heavy action is the rod that I like for that. It's got a good tip to it. I'm able to skip that frog in there the way I want to, and it's not so long that it's I'm going to be hitting the water, working the bait, or anything like that. If I'm making longer casts, more open water, I'm going to go to the 7-3 medium heavy. So drop back just a little bit on the action to the medium heavy, but the 7-3 just a little bit more length. I've used that rod a lot over the years and caught a ton of fish with it. And for your colors on your frog, man, keep it pretty simple. A shad color like that smoked silver shad, the black camo, cocoa camo, maybe a bluegill. You don't need a ton of different colors, 2 or 3 different ones. If you really notice the fish are feeding on bluegill, go with that. If you've seen them feed on shad a lot more, go with something shad color. And if you just don't know, always go with black. I mean, a black frog is always kind of the staple to go by, and always seems to work well. Next up for the flipping setup, the Texas rig, that's a Johnny Morse Platinum rod, 7/6 heavy action, platinum reel, 8-3-1 gear ratio, and 65-pound test braided. That's the Bass Pro braided line, and I've got 50 on that frog as well, 50-pound test Bass Pro braid. But then I've got a bobber stop. I think that's a 1 ounce weight that I've got on here. And then that 4/0 VMC heavy duty wide gap hook. And again, that's one of my favorite baits to put on that Bass Pro Bull Hog. But that's a great setup for flipping. I like the 7/6. I'll go up to a 7/10 if it's really, really heavy stuff. And it's a little bit deeper. If it's 5 to 7 foot or something down in that stuff, I might go up to that 7/10. But that 7/6, it pretty much does the job for everything you need. But get out there this month, put on some sunscreen, take plenty of water, but look for that heavy cover and take those 2 baits right there, fish one across the top, flip one down in it, and don't even worry about the edges so much, man. Fish right in the heart of that stuff. That's where those big bass are going to be holding down in the shade.